It is the NFL Every Game on the Board podcast. We got Teddy Covers followed by Rob Vino. We're going to be hitting on all the Sunday games and the 2 Monday games at the end. Without further ado, Mr. Covers, welcome into the podcast.
Hey, how are you doing today, Drew?
I'm doing good. Excited to get into some NFL action here, and we can just start off right at the top here. 453, 454, Pittsburgh, Cleveland. We got 4.5 showing at Pinnacle, 4 pretty much across the board, 43.5 as the total. How you looking to bet Pitt, Cleveland, Teddy?
Well, I mean, we've seen a lot of under money come in on this game over the course of the last 48 hours, and you surely understand why the weather forecast in Pittsburgh looks like the worst one. I'd say in Cleveland, it looks like the worst forecast for anywhere where we got games this weekend. Wind's supposed to be blowing. It's supposed to be raining throughout. So the field conditions in Cleveland not supposed to be great here. And you throw in the concerns about Cleveland's offense. And look, the Browns have some playmakers. You know, Josh Gordon and Jarvis Landry, Antonio Callaway, Carlos Hyde, Duke Johnson. It's not like this team doesn't have anyone that can catch the ball or run the ball or move the football. What the problem they had last year was obviously turnovers. This year with Tyrod Taylor at QB, you would expect the turnovers to go down. You'd also expect the deep shots to go down. Taylor, a quarterback who's been extraordinarily efficient throughout his NFL career in Buffalo at not making mistakes. But in terms of a yards per pass type of guy, he's a check down Charlie. He's not likely to throw the football around. Defensively, Cleveland looks loaded, you know, and I mean, no shortage of guys who are legitimately impact players in the defense side of the football. That's what happens when you finish near the bottom of the league just about every season and have an opportunity to draft a lot of defense. So on paper, that Browns defense looks pretty darn good. The offense still has some questions. You know, for Pittsburgh, and of course, the offense going with Todd Haley this year, and Randy Fitchner going to be calling the plays for the Steelers after Haley's been there, the last 6 years. That would expect that the Steelers would have a pretty good idea of some of what Cleveland wants to do, being that they've had the Browns offense coordinator for a number of years. And the new guy, Fitchner, the reports are, quote, they're going to see more tempo and more no-huddle offense, which is something that the Steelers have been fairly efficient at in recent seasons. Pittsburgh's going to go up-tempo, and that, at least so far, has kept a cap on how low this total has gone, although given the weather circumstances, you know, we've already seen this total was 47.5 in some spots of the opener. We have 43 in some spots now, and I don't think it goes much lower because of the Steelers' game plan of going up-tempo.
Yeah, almost a 5-point move. The Westgate even as low as 42.5. Don't see that all too often in the NFL. Teddy, we got 455, 456, San Francisco, Minnesota. Minnesota been bought up to about 6.5 across the board, 46 the total. You liking Jimmy G in this spot, Teddy?
Well, I mean, you know, the Vikings were like, 4.5 over the summer, and we've seen the money kind of trickle in on Minnesota. Some of which is, I mean, remember, for week one lines, there is a clear correlation between your season win total number and the point spread. That doesn't continue to occur after week one. But for week one, it's pretty clear. And we've seen a fair bit of San Fran under 8.5 money come in. That was as high as 9 when the line opened at 4.5, and now, 8.5 to the under in a lot of places. So we've seen the markets get less enthusiastic about San Francisco, despite the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo, as an NFL starter, 7-0 straight up, 7-0 against the spread. And Minnesota in the preseason, make no mistake about it, their offense didn't work in August. It flat out didn't. They had injuries all over the offensive line. And obviously you're talking about a team that's making a QB change. Kirk Cousins in Washington had some success. He was not the best quarterback in the NFL or anything close. Now, with the offensive line issues coming out of training camp for Minnesota, the fact that Cousins had a pretty rough August learning this offense may be something of concern for Minnesota backers. But boy, defensively, that Vikings team looks absolutely loaded. And they do have a significantly better defense, I would think, than San Francisco. But from an offensive line standpoint, I am worried about Minnesota in this ballgame. Their OL isn't 100%, and it needs to be for Cousins to look comfortable.
Teddy covers, obviously knowing his stuff. He's got his 20-star on the front page in college football and the NFL. Also a 15-star, Teddy, on the Sunday night game. And I know we're talking NFL, which you know your stuff, but you had a perfect weekend, week one in college football. So feeling confident going into this week as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was a perfect football weekend, in fact, because we nailed the only winner, the only game I released for NFL Week 4 in the preseason was a 20-star betting against the Dallas Cowboys, and that cashed as well. So it was a real good week last week. But look, man, that's all rearview mirror. You know what I mean? We can all pat ourselves in the back. Yeah, I did great last week. Yeah, I did great last year. My clients don't care about that. Your clients don't care about that. They care about what are you going to do for me this weekend. And frankly, you know, when you talk about Week 1 NFL, these are lines that have been around a long, long time. They've been pounded into place. It's not a week where I'm going nuts, but yeah, there's certainly a handful of plays that really stood out to me at current numbers. And you talked about the Sunday night game. That's one of them, but certainly not the only one.
All right, past performance not indicative of future results, but hey.
Not necessarily indicative of future results. Look, you want to go with guys with good track records, okay? But to say, all right, I did this last year, okay, that's great. Do it again. You know, that's our job, Drew. That's what we've got. Our clients don't care what we did last week or yesterday. They care what are we going to do today, what are we going to do this weekend.
All right, we got a couple, a bunch more games to go here on the Every Game on the Board podcast, but did want to let you guys know we got a coupon code here for the podcast. 100 off. You can get $100 off of Teddy's full season under a dime for both college football and the NFL through the Super Bowl, through the national championship. Get his props, everything like that. You get right on release. Just type in 100 off at checkout. 457-458 Cincinnati, Indianapolis 48 the total, 2.5 across the board, a 3 showing at Westgate. Teddy, how you looking to bet Cincinnati, Indianapolis?
Well, I mean, it's a Colts team. If you ask me which team has more question marks coming into the season, I mean, the Indy's got question marks everywhere. You know, reports out of practice haven't been good about Andrew Luck throwing the football around. You know, he's not back anywhere near to the Andrew Luck that we saw as an MVP candidate, 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's a Colts defense that, on paper, there's a lot of holes there. Let's just put it that way. And, of course, Indy replaces Chuck Pagano, brings in Frank Reich. We have new systems on both sides of the football. But more than anything for Indy, they have to figure out how to hold the lead. Last year they had 9 games where they went into halftime with the lead. They won 2 of those. They went into the fourth quarter 9 times last year, which makes them the only team in the last 20 years to hold fourth quarter leads in at least 9 games and finish no better than 4-12. So clearly the late game execution was a problem for Indy last year. They weren't blown off the field regularly, but they certainly weren't a squad that was able to close out tight games, which is something they're going to have to do in this point spread range. As for Indy, excuse me. Sorry. Excuse me. As for Cincinnati, I should say, big upgrades on the offensive line. You bring in Billy Price with the number 1 pick out of Ohio State at the center spot. You trade for the left tackle, Cordy Glenn, out of Buffalo. That matters, and when you have John Ross finally showing signs in the preseason and Tyler Eifert finally staying healthy through a preseason and A.J. Green still being one of the most dangerous receivers in the NFL, all of a sudden, Bengals are a team that has playmakers on defense, good skill position talent on offense. The betting marketplace isn't giving them a whole lot of respect. So if I'm playing this game, I can only look at the Cincinnati side. I do not trust Indianapolis to win games and to get stops when it matters in the fourth quarter.
Teddy, next up, Buffalo, Baltimore, 40.5 the total. Looks like this one, man, maybe the biggest move as far as side movement. 3.5 on Baltimore, up to over 7.5. Big move here, Teddy, on this game. We got Bills, Ravens. What's up with the move, and do you see any value going forward?
This is what I'm kicking myself for not releasing early, and I ended up putting out as a free play on Baltimore. But boy, I had a bet on the Bills under their season win total when I was back at 6.5. Prior to the preseason, and all of a sudden everyone started paying attention to Buffalo and going, gee, this team has no quarterback. And of course, the market's crashed and the season wins for the Bills. The market's crashed on the Bills for this ball game. And from a power rating standpoint, when you're ranking the NFL teams, I mean, you could tell me where you want to put the likes of Cleveland and the Jets, but Buffalo's right there with them at the very bottom of the NFL, power rating wise, coming into in the new campaign. Despite the fact that they won 9 games last year, everyone knows that the 9 wins were fraudulent. The offense didn't really work. They won more than their fair share of tight ball games. And the question is, and of course we got Nathan Peterman getting the start for the Bills. Anyone that saw him in his first NFL start will not be betting Buffalo this week. You remember that game against the Chargers? What did he throw? 5 picks in the first half and then got benched? It was as ugly a game as I've ever seen.
Yeah, I do.
I had the other side of that game, so that was nice. It was easy. But the bottom line is Peterman's better than that. I don't think we're going to see the type of performance that we saw against the Chargers last year, where it lasted only a half. But it's not a Bills team that's loaded with quality weapons right now. And certainly when we talk about Baltimore, a team coming off another non-playoff season, Drew, the Ravens healthy coming out of August, and most assuredly a team that's, you might call them a mission team. They failed to make the playoffs 3 of the last 4 years. There's talk that Harbaugh's on the hot seat. Everything I've read about the Browns, the Ravens this August has been of the positive variety. There's a lot to like about Baltimore coming into 2018.
Teddy, we got an interesting one here. 461, 462, 1 o'clock kick on the East Coast. This one's in New York. Jacksonville, a team, if you would just read the press clippings, people kind of went after him. Blake Bortles, the whole, Blake Bortles facts on Twitter, kind of making fun of him. It's kind of an entertaining follow, but overall, they had success. So laying 3, they were at 3.5, now bought down to 3, so the market going against them, against the Giants, which we all knew their issues last year, but I guess looking for kind of a bounce back here with 42.5 the total, now 3, you can find some 2.5s with juice. What's up with this move, Teddy, and do you see any value?
Well, I mean, there seems to be a little bit of anti-Jacksonville sentiment and a little bit of pro-Giants sentiment, but not a ton. For either team. We have Blake Bortles versus Eli Manning. No wonder the under's getting slammed. Eli Manning was a bottom-tier NFL quarterback last year. Coming into 2018, I got to think that Eli Manning is a bottom-tier NFL quarterback again this year. Blake Bortles was a bottom-tier NFL quarterback last year. You watched him in August. He looked no better. So you have 2 teams with legit QB question marks. And certainly when we talk about the Giants, look at the skill position talent. Saquon Barkley. I don't know if the Giants have an offensive line to do anything. I don't know if they're going to be able to run the football. I don't know that Eli Manning's not going to be under pressure on every down. I don't know if they have the skill position talent, even with OBJ signed to be competitive offensively. Pat Shurmur era, they've got some work to do. I'll just put it that way. But for the Jags, I love the offseason signing of Andrew Norwell at guard. A team that needs to run the football. They need to pound Leonard Fournette, and a good run blocking guard like Norwell goes a long way for that. But remember, Jacksonville last year lived on turnover margin, and they were extraordinarily healthy, one of the healthiest teams in the NFL. Does that happen again in 2018? Certainly if the Jags aren't forcing turnovers, it's hard to trust this offense to march up and down the field and put up touchdowns.
463, 464, Teddy, we got Tampa versus New Orleans division matchup here, 49.5 the total. This one been bought up as well. We got the Saints laying doubles at some shops, but 9.5 is pretty much the consensus. At 10 at bookmaker Chris. Tampa Bay, New Orleans. It's in New Orleans. Any opinion on betting this one?
What did you hear that? Sorry.
No, but we can just cut it out. I'll just introduce this game again, and we'll go from there.
Sure. No. Your introduce is fine. I had my mute on first. I apologize. I'll just count myself.
And take your break if you need to cough or whatever.
No. It's all good. I just hit my mute and forgot to re-hit it.
Okay.
So but you hear me now. It's fine. I'm just going to go 3, 2, 1 and count myself in. You're good. And when you cut it to right here where I start.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
3, 2, 1. Dirk Cutter is the favorite for the first coach to be fired this year, and a clear favorite for the first NFL head coach to lose his job. And when you look at their schedule, you understand why. They open up at New Orleans, then Philly, then Pittsburgh, then at Chicago, then at Atlanta. They got at Cincy, at Carolina. It's a tough opening slate for Tampa Bay. Obviously, a team playing without Jameis Winston. Their offense worked in the preseason, regardless of who was behind center. They really moved the football well in August with Todd Monken calling the plays. Of course, Cutter and Monken supposed to share play calling duties. That's, we'll see how that works out. Ryan Fitzpatrick going to get the start at QB for Tampa here. And look, the Bucs aren't hopeless, but they're in a division with 3 really good teams. They beat New Orleans last year. Tampa did in Week 17. Of course, when they traveled to New Orleans, they lost that game by 20. And for the Saints, New Orleans is a top-heavy team. Their starters are elite, position after position after position. They don't have a lot of depth. We worry about how New Orleans is going to look come November and December, but coming out of the gate, you can understand why the Saints are double-digit chalks at a lot of spots in this ballgame, even though 9.5 still the prevailing number. We have seen a little bit of under money, but we've seen a little bit of under money all over the place. Drew, there's far more unders been getting steam than overs, despite the rule changes and the nature of the NFL in 2018, where offenses seem to be ruling the day.
What do you think that is, Teddy, across the board of unders, with rule changes going towards it, or just
Week 1? It's okay. Week 1. That's what it's about. It's about offenses in the long term, the 10-year and the 20-year sample size says bet Week 1 under. And what you're going to see is many bettors just looking for the games they want to pound under, and that's the ones that are getting hit.
So the old adage, the defense is ahead of the offense early in the season.
Yeah, and certainly, the game we saw last night between the Eagles and the Falcons is on full display. That concept was on full display. Nothing has more to do with totals and red zone execution. And, in terms of games going over or under, teams that score touchdowns in the red zone, just like basketball, it's, free throw attempts. In the NFL, it's red zone execution. And if you're not scoring touchdowns, your games don't go over. And if you are scoring touchdowns, your games do go over. And one thing we tend to see in Week 1 is, in the NFL at least, is that the red zone execution sometimes is lacking coming out of training camp. And especially this year, where so many teams played their starters for so few snaps in August, the markets are expecting a good handful of low-scoring games, relatively low-scoring games on Sunday. Remember, this is the first. I saw something and I didn't double-check it, but I saw something that was like the first time since totals have been made that there isn't a single Week 1 total that's below 40. And of course, the totals have been around for 40 years now. So the entire marketplace has shifted upwards. So I'm not surprised that bettors are looking for individual games, and a good handful of them to bet under the total.
All right, sharp stuff going under. And guys, remember that 100 off coupon? That's 100 off OFF, and you get $100 off of Teddy's full season service here. We got 465, 466, Houston, New England, 51. This total is 6 or 6.5 across the board. Houston, New England. How you looking to bet this one, Teddy?
That 100 off isn't just for me, right? That's for anyone. If they don't want me, they're more than happy to get your season or anybody else's season with that same discount, correct?
They can do whatever they want, Teddy.
Yeah, right on. So, if you don't like me, that's fine. You can like somebody else. I'm not insulted.
Why wouldn't they like you? You know your stuff.
It's okay. I'm not mad. You're allowed to have your opinion. Houston and New England. So I found this just this morning. When it comes to New England's offensive line, they let Nate Solder go in the offseason, and now New England is paying their offensive line less than any other offensive line in the NFL. Total salary on the offensive line. Does that come back to haunt them somewhere? I wonder. It might. When you talk about offensive line concerns, I don't know that I have a more concerning offensive line than the Texans. Everything's to love about Houston. Oh, my God, they were injured beyond belief last year, and their offensive line was riddled last year, and their quarterback got hurt, and the turnover margin was a nightmare. Look at all the skill position talent. Look at all these defensive studs. You can go on and about everything to like about Houston. Remember what Deshaun Watson did in Foxborough last year? Yeah, everything looks great for the Texans except that offensive line. That offensive line looks like a sieve to me. I think it's going to be a problem. The markets don't seem to be too worried about it yet. Look at this, the highest total on the board. Money's coming on Houston, but and look, the long-term track record, Super Bowl loser at home week 1, Super Bowl loser week 1, they're terrible. I think like 2-15 ATS the last 17. I mean, it's really been awful. The Falcons last year didn't cover week 1 in Chicago is the latest example. So the technicals don't point towards New England here at all. But I've got my concerns about the Texans. I think this team's, there's a lot to like, but when you talk about a red flag, a glaring, blinking, giant red flag, here's a QB that just got hurt last year, and is going to be taking hits every game. I like the Texans, but I don't love them, and it seems to be a lot of love in the betting marketplace for Houston.
Teddy,
the Patriots, by the way, the single best point spread team in the NFL over the last 2 years, and it's not even close.
Teddy, you bring up the Super Bowl losers in their ATS the next game. You think that's correlative year after year?
I think it's something worth noting that Super Bowl losers the following season tend to get off to slow starts. Yes. Is that alone going to get me to the window to bet the Patriots? No. But when you're building a case, it's certainly something that you would consider in that regard. I do think that there's something to that it's not just randomness.
Okay. 4, 6, 7. This is the last game up here. The 1 o'clock steady you're getting, then we'll throw the 4 o'clocks and Mondays to Vino coming up next. We got 4, 6, 7, 4, 6, 8. Tennessee, Miami. 1.5, even a pick'em at 5 dimes. 45 the total. This one in Miami, in South Florida here. You have any opinion on Tennessee, Miami?
I got an opinion about you calling the early games the 1 o'clock games. No, my friend. They are the 10 o'clock games.
Ooh, all right. Little Pacific
that's the thing about Vegas. It was so I still remember the first year I was out here. It's just so weird. The 9 o'clock starts on Saturdays and the 10 o'clock starts on Sundays, and you're not used to it. And then you get used to it, and you're like, oh, my God, how did I sit around and wait for 4 hours before kickoff? When I lived back east, it's just brutal. But obviously the early games we've just gone through. We'll do the late games. I'll do the late games with Rob Vino. But look, Tennessee and Miami are two teams that – and this is an interesting point. It really is an interesting game. They're two teams – the markets hate might not be strong enough. They really don't like either one of these teams, but Tennessee in particular. A team, again, like Buffalo, a playoff team from last year. Everyone says it was all fraudulent for Tennessee, and Mariota's no good. And look what they've done. They were a playoff team, and now you're bringing in a new head coach and a new system on offense and a new system on defense, and they didn't look good in August. There's not a lot of love right now for Tennessee. There really isn't. And, when you talk to people around town, everyone's the Titans last year were fraudulent. Look at the division. They're in big trouble. Houston's better than they are. Jacksonville's better than they are. And Indy's on the way up. And, there's just not much support for Tennessee at all, or Mariota in particular, despite and of course, the bad preseason doesn't help matters in that regard either. When you look at the Dolphins side of the equation, and again, the injuries for Miami are definitely a concern. Another key guy going down. Devontae Parker doesn't look like he's going to play. Marquise Gray is who I was just talking about, who just got hurt, the tight end. So it's a Dolphins team coming off. I mean, the last year was pretty dismal with Jay Cutler. Now it's Adam Gate's third season. It's Ryan Tannehill. It's make or break time for Miami. But, to be honest, I'm not convinced the Titans are the better of these two teams. We've seen the Miami money already. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the Dolphins come away with a victory in this ballgame against a Tennessee team that is going to have to earn respect from the markets. They're not coming in the season getting a whole lot.
Teddy, where would you rank Marcus Mariota as far as top tier, middle tier, bottom tier in the NFL?
I could only rank a middle tier right now. I'd rank a middle tier.
Okay. You would say that they have the better quarterback in this matchup, right?
Mariota versus Tannehill, I'll grade that neutral.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, look, I'm somewhat of a Tannehill believer. I really am. And I like Gase and his ability to keep defenses off balance. And I mean, Tannehill versus Mariota, as a pretty close to pick 'em, as a QB battle in my mind. I don't think Mariota's got a big edge if he has an edge at all.
Yeah, no, good stuff. I don't disagree with you very confidently. I'd go with Mariota, but yeah, this is a almost a pick'em price here with one on the road for Tennessee. It should be a fun one to watch, and that wraps up excuse me, Teddy, the 10 a.m. kickoff games. Anything you want to throw out to the listeners before we shut this down for the week?
Well, that's the whole deal. I mean, Sports Memo's been a Vegas. We've been a Vegas company. We've got a bunch of guys in Vegas out here. We got to give the Vegas starting times, man. It's just how we're branded. Look, week one. Wow, as we speak, we're seeing a big move on Chicago. The 7.5s are getting bought up on the Bears, and that's all becoming 7s right now. And you talked about at the start. Remember, you said pennies at 4.5.
Yep.
At the very start of the podcast for the Steelers Browns. Well, now, lo and behold, this is why we talk about penny as a leading indicator book. Penny was the only one we started this podcast. Now, 5 dimes at 4.5, ground days at 4.5, bookmakers at 4.5. No, bookmakers 4 minus 15. Sorry, they're getting there, et cetera, et cetera. But we've already seen the market start to move on that one. That's the joy of a podcast, man. We have a beginning and an end, and by the end, we get to say this is what changed from the start.
Great stuff, like always, Teddy. And you're right, Penny being the leading indicator there. You got to watch out for that in all sports, really. But for Teddy Covers, I'm Drew Martin. Guys, remember that 100 off if you're looking to go full season with Teddy or any other handicapper. Teddy, thanks for the time, and we'll be right back with Robbie Vino.